Thank you very much, everybody. And as you know, the Executive published on Tuesday its 5-stage plan for how our society will gradually emerge from lockdown. The Executive met today to assess where we are in terms of our battle against COVID-19 and to consider what restrictions might be lifted as we start to move towards recovery and renewal. And on the basis of the latest scientific and medical advice, the Executive has approved the following measures. From next Monday, garden centres and ornamental plant nurseries will be allowed to open their doors to customers, of course, with the proper social distancing measures in place. Ministers are also content that household recycling centres should be open to the public and that the disposal of household waste at those sites should be added to the list of what constitutes an appropriate reason for travel. And finally, the Executive have agreed that marriage ceremonies for the terminally ill should be allowed to proceed. For couples where one of the party or a close family member has only a short time left, delaying a marriage is not really an option, and we very much recognise that today. We are publishing our matrix upon which decisions are taken. That's going to be available on the Department of Health website. That shows the risk assessment that takes place. We're trying to be open and transparent with everyone so that everyone's clear about how we arrive at these decisions, because we believe that that is very important, because we do understand that we're asking you to stay with us and trust us in making these decisions, so we want to enable you to do that. We are considering the lifting of other restrictions as we progress through our 5-point plan, and we hope to unveil more about the implementation of Stage 1 on Monday. However, it is important that everyone understands that the process of relaxing restrictions will be incremental and there won't be a dramatic shift in relation to the lifting of restrictions. Each decision is based on the latest scientific and medical analysis of the pandemic, its transmission rate and its future trajectory. It is based on the capacity of our health and social care services to deal with COVID-19 and their ability to resume normal services, and it's also based on an assessment of the wider health, societal and economic impacts of any measures. So the restrictions will only be lifted if we're convinced that the risk of infection is low and if we believe it is in the long-term interest of the public and of health and of well-being. And after 8 weeks of lockdown, today's announcements amount to, we accept, very tentative first steps towards recovery. So as we cautiously chart our way towards something approaching normality, we will need you to continue to work with us, in partnership with us, and indeed with the medical and scientific experts who advise us, to allow us to guide you on when it's safe to resume certain activities. Our roadmap will only succeed if everyone is patient, if you respect the advice of experts, if you continue to show discipline and compliance, and if you maintain the collective will that has so far allowed us to escape the worst ravages of COVID-19. So we've come a long way by following that advice, and I'm asking you to continue to do that. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Arlene, and good afternoon to everyone. And again, let me begin today by offering our condolences to the loved ones of the 5 people who have died today. We're very sorry for your loss, and our thoughts are with you at this sad time. Earlier this week, we set out our roadmap for how we can begin to slowly and to gradually move out of lockdown and give people some more freedom to live their lives in the safest way possible while we're forced to coexist with COVID-19. At that time, we said that we would keep you updated every step of the way, and when we're in a position to do so, and when we're in a position to make any changes to the harsh restrictions we've all been living with to protect people and to save lives. You'll know that we deliberately didn't set any dates or attach any dates or timescales to our plan, because that gives us the flexibility and to be agile and to respond in the best way that we can at any given point in time. That flexibility gives us the ability to move through the various stages when the time is right for us to do so. The Executive has had a very positive discussion around our recovery plan today, and we considered a number of specific issues. It's clear that we are now moving towards step 1 on our pathway. And today we are announcing that from Monday, garden centres will be permitted to open as long as social distancing and public health guidelines can be adhered to. Recycling centres will be permitted to open. And as Arlene said, marriages on the grounds of ill health will be permitted to take place where one or both parties has a terminal illness. The changes to the restrictions that we have agreed today have been considered in detail and have been informed by medical and scientific advice. We must remember that the regulations are in place to save lives, and the Executive does not take decisions on whether to maintain or indeed to relax the restrictions lightly. Every decision is carefully judged based on an evaluation of risk and potential benefits. Our ability to recover from coronavirus will be a partnership. It will be a partnership effort involving every single member of society. And as our partners in that recovery plan, it is right that we are open and honest with you, the public, about how we make our assessments and how we arrive at those most important decisions on your behalf. So we have agreed to publish the decision-making matrix that we use to inform those judgments. We can also say that we are working our way through the detail of a number of other measures. And on Monday, we will move towards step 1 in our phased recovery plan. We will come back to update you on further easements that can happen soon. We all know that our recovery process will be incremental, because that will give us the best possible chance at keeping the virus spread below 1, so that we can continue to reduce the threat of another spike in cases and prevent the health service from being overwhelmed. But I hope that the positive progress today will give the public some hope and some reassurance that this won't last forever, and reassure you all that we will keep you fully informed as and when the time is right to ease further restrictions. As we move through this process of recovery, it's important to emphasise that any changes to the restrictions do not mean that we can relax our behaviour in any way. In fact, the need for everyone to abide by the public health message is ever more important. We all have to remain vigilant against the threat of COVID-19 to protect ourselves, protect our families and the most vulnerable in our society. Slowly but surely we can get there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ministers. Tracy McGee, UTV. I'm wondering what's changed in the last 48 hours to allow you to make these changes, however slight they may be?
Well, Tracy, as we said, we're publishing the matrix upon which we take these decisions. When you look at that matrix, you will see that it is a risk assessment. When we asked where the R number is today, we were told it was below 0.7 today. So I think that obviously has an implication, but also we look at the number of people who have the disease, and because the R is below 1, it means that the transmission then is not spreading as widely as would allow those numbers to grow again. So we have to take that into account. You will also see in the matrix that we don't just take into account negative health impacts. We have to take into account positive health impacts of relaxing the regulations. We have to take into account societal impacts and then, of course, economic impacts as well. So taking all of those in the round, that has allowed us to deal with these, yes, very limited pieces today. And we will continue to look at those other issues in step 1 over the coming days because, look, we have been very clear. We want to give hope to people. We recognise that these restrictions are draconian. We recognise they're having a huge impact on people's lives. And given that is the case, it is our duty to make sure that when we are able to lift the regulations, that we do lift those regulations, but we do it in a way that is safe, which is graduated, which is step by step, and which means that we keep the virus under control. So I am content with the moves that we are making today, and we will continue. We said it on Tuesday, we would keep continuously coming back to the public to tell them what we were doing, and that's exactly what we're doing today.
I think the only way that this partnership is going to work if between ourselves and the public is if we're honest along this journey, and we want to give people as much information as we can as we move our way through recovery. There's no room for complacency. These are gradual, small, baby steps that we're taking. But the reason or where we are today in terms of the virus spread is that it is relatively stable. But again, there is no room for complacency, because the more people move around, then clearly the more the virus spread will go up, and we're obviously trying to keep that as low as possible. So these are baby steps today, but we want to continually to give people some hope that the major restrictions that we're all living under right now, that there is light at the end of that tunnel, and hopefully today is a wee step or a wee glimmer of light for people.
Good afternoon, First and Deputy First Ministers Mark Devonport, BBC Northern Ireland. First of all, just to clarify what you have said about the risk matrix, does that mean that on a daily basis now you're going to be publishing the R number, which indicates the rate of transmission of the virus in Northern Ireland, and maybe also how that's worked out in terms of data? And I also wonder whether you've heard some comments that the Health Minister, Robin Swan, made in the Chamber. At the end of his statement, he said that over the last decade, Stormont has let the NHS down, vital services have been underfunded, and difficult choices have been ducked. Given that your two parties were in charge for, I think, 9 out of the 10 years he's talking about, do you accept his comments or not?
Well, Mark, we're certainly not going to get into a battle with the Health Minister over funding, because, of course, as you know, we're funded through a block grant from Westminster. It's based on a Barnett consequential in terms of health spending in the UK. So, of course, we would have much desired to have more money to spend on health over this past number of years. And I think if you look back at a number of interventions by former First and Deputy First Ministers, you will see that that was the case. So that is true. And I think we have to recognise that we are entering into a new normal. And I think Michelle and I have both said that, you know, we do very much appreciate the work that goes on in our National Health Service. Sometimes when you have something and it's there and it's functioning, it gets taken for granted. But I don't think anybody takes the National Health Service for granted anymore. They know absolutely how important it is to people right across Northern Ireland. So I think that will be reflected in the future. In the new norm, we will come, I hope, to recognise the importance of the National Health Service. In terms of how we come to the decision today, yes, we did have our Chief Scientific Advisor telling us about the R number today, but it is around, the R number is very important. It's about the number of cases within the community, how we can make sure that they keep falling, that the transmission keeps falling. That's very important for us. What impact the relaxation of the regulation is going to have on the transmission of the disease. And that's why we felt it important to publish the matrix upon which our decisions are being made, so that people can see what we're taking into consideration when we're looking at all of these regulations. And I hope it will help inform some people as well as to why we're having to keep some of the regulations for another period of time.
Yeah, so I think that it's important that, you know, whenever we talk about the R rate, that we explain to people that what we're trying to do is keep it as low as we possibly can, so we have some room for manoeuvre and some flexibility to lift the restrictions. So we hope that the matrix just gives people that the breadth of the analysis that looks at both from the high end of risk to the greatest end of benefit, and then how we try to make an assessment on things. But we have to come at this from a very strategic, thought-out way, as we have set out in our plan, as opposed to just coming every day with, you know, we can do this, we can do that. We've told people, and we live by the promise that we will continue to try to make life better for people as quickly as we possibly can, and that remains our position. On the commentary around budgets of the Assembly, I know that the Health Minister and his party used to be bedfellows of the Tories, but I don't think even he should be blinded to the fact that the Tories have stripped this executive of funding over 10 years, and the impact that's had on our health service and our public services are well rehearsed and well known to everybody. Even the fact and the condition we were in as a health service to be able to respond to COVID-19 was greatly diminished because of the impact of Tory austerity over many, many years.
First Minister, Deputy First Minister, David Young from PA here. A question, if you don't mind, in regard to children and schools. You'd be aware of some of the emerging evidence in regard to children, and evidence that suggests that they potentially don't transmit the disease as much as adults. Also some evidence from other countries that have started to reopen schools. Denmark, I think, for instance, has had primary schools open for a month and their R rate has actually dropped. Does that sort of evidence in any way influence your thinking in regard to the timetable for schools? And as the weeks move on, could there potentially be a rethinking of that timetable from, and not just schools, because obviously there's a natural break for the term, but other childcare settings such as nurseries?
David, as you know, we've said all along that we want to not only learn from other countries about their experiences as they come out of lockdown, and many countries are ahead of us in the transmission of the virus, so we can use that information when we're putting in place our policy plans. But also, because this is a novel coronavirus, we're learning all the time about the transmission of the virus and how people get immunity from it, and who are the carriers and who gets it and who's most vulnerable to it. So we are taking into account all of those issues that will form part of our policy thinking. But I think it is right for us to say that there's an awful lot of planning to go into the reopening of our schools. I was down visiting a school yesterday, Pawn Park in Lisburn, where they had some kids from key workers there. About 15 children were there, and they were showing me how they socially distance the children when they're in the classroom. And it is a huge challenge moving forward. So the Minister of Education has a big job of work to do with the trade unions, obviously, with the teaching staff, with all of the schools, to make sure that when we do send our children back to school, that it is done in a planned way. And we had to close our schools very quickly, and we know all of the challenges that brought in relation to distance learning and how that impacts on children. We'll have a job of work to do to look at those children who perhaps haven't kept up to date with their schooling. So a huge job of work to be done in the Department of Education, and that very much will look at what's happening here, but absolutely what's happening in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to concur in terms of the planning that's going to be required to get us to that point in September, end of August. I mean, this has to be done in conjunction with our teachers, with the trade union representatives, with our principals, working together to chart out what's the best way, what does school look like for children returning. And it's going to be very different to what went before for some time. I spoke to a teacher last night who actually expressed those very fears to me. She actually said she was fearful about how that the pupils would manage, the natural fear factor in people's head about children touching surfaces and, all of those things. They're real and genuine fears. So we need very solid information to guide teachers and our schools through that period. And there's a big body of work to be done over the next weeks and months ahead to get us ready for children to be able to get back to education, which we all know they all so desperately need.
Hi, First and Deputy First Minister. First of all, in relation to people who have received shielding letters, I know you mentioned allowing marriages for people who are terminally ill. Many of those people have life-limiting illnesses and have obviously been very disturbed by some recent speculation that they may be asked to shield for up to another year. Can you give any indication of when those people might be given further details about what will be expected of them? And second of all, the Older Persons Commissioner, Eddie Lynch, said this morning that he thought there should be universal testing in all old people's homes in order to put a ring of steel around those homes, not just homes where COVID has already been detected. Is there a plan in place to do that in order to protect the spread of coronavirus in care homes?
See, in terms of the people that are shielding, their advice currently is for 12 weeks that they have to stay at home, and that message is still exactly the same message today. So please, I would encourage anybody that even as things are eased in any way, it doesn't apply. If you're in the shielding category, you have to be considered separately. But we also need to give those people hope that this is not going to go on forever, and there's certainly no plans that have been brought before us that actually look at keeping people in for a year or any of that. But as soon as there's any change to their current position of the 12 weeks and the advice that they were given from their own GPs or their own health professional, that has not changed, and they should just listen to that advice, and we'll try to make sure that if there's more clarity to be got, then that is the clarity that they need to get. Those people are more vulnerable than everybody else, so we need to make sure that they hear the message loud and clear. On Eddie Lynch, the Older Persons Commissioner, comments, we actually spoke with him 2 days ago, and I actually share his view. I think we both share his view around universal testing. That's something that we need to have in our nursing homes. That is the way to protect our nursing homes. We all know that's where the battle is, and we very quickly need to get to the point where all the residents and the staff are tested on a regular basis, because that will give us some protection alongside all the other measures, because there is plenty of things happening, and we need everything to actually come together, because we need to make sure we leave no stone unturned in our nursing homes.
And Alison, can I just reference back to the point about marriage for people who are terminally ill? A number of us were contacted by a lady in Banbridge whose cousin was terminally ill, and the one thing she wanted to do was to get married, and we just felt that it was wrong, that it couldn't happen, and that's why we have reacted in terms of trying to deal with that issue, and I'm sure there's others out there as well upon whom this impacts. And we also realise that there are many people who want to get married because they, for religious reasons, don't want to live together before they're married, and we understand that, and we're listening very carefully to that, and we're working through all of that as well. So I want to say that to them, that we are trying to find a way forward on that. And you know, we put these restrictions in by their very nature very quickly, and as a result of that, unintended consequences have come forward to us during this period of time, and we're trying to deal with those in the most humane way that we possibly can, because we recognise absolutely that these are very draconian and that we need to deal with them. Overall, we believe they are proportional and they are necessary for the public health of people in Northern Ireland, but we do very much understand that we need to move to try and deal with some of these issues that have been brought to our attention. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to deal with that. Michelle's right, we dealt with Eddie Lynch a couple of days ago, and we were very concerned by some of the commentary and the narrative that he gave to us as an advocate for older people. So we're working with the Health Minister to try and make sure that the interventions that are put in place, not just now, but in the future, are appropriate for the care home settings. We think that that is something that is key. It's where the battleground is now, and it's something that we have to deal with.